Hi, it's the end of the week.
It is Friday. We've made it.
We've made it. And we've got a very exciting topic that we're going to cover today. Inspired by that. Well, let me show you what it is. Everyone always we're inspired by this Forbes article, which says navigating the upswing. I mean, I'm actually changing it.
You are paraphrasing.
Navigating the upswing in mergers and acquisitions for 2024. And it's kind of an interesting thing. In our world, mergers, well, first, I don't know what a merger means. Mostly it's a company buying another company, which to me is an acquisition. Can you imagine? I'm sure people might describe some things as mergers, but like almost all the time, it's a company buying another company. It's an acquisition.
You got to keep the peace, though. We're
Make other
merging
people
to
feel
become
good.
one.
We're merging to become one. And this is something that I find really an interesting topic. That's great to talk about with you. You have, in your much shorter career than mine, but still quite long career, have seen a lot of project work develop out of an acquisition.
Yes.
And I'm going to set the stage and then we'll talk.
Okay.
So if we picture this, if you are a lawyer, okay, or accountants, or you're in finance, or you're a banker, or whatever, a lot of times you think of all the heavy lifting of an acquisition coming before the contract is signed and the acquisition happens. And I don't blame them. That's where all their work is. I mean, and it's tedious, and there's exacting language, and then there's all these complicated, treasury merging and other items of uniting two companies. But actually, from an operational perspective, all the hard work happens after the two companies have become a single entity.
It's when the fun begins.
The fun begins because you've got these two separately functioning, different culture, different assets, different infrastructure, different technology, different everything. And the premise very often of the benefit of the acquisition or the merger is an efficiency that comes from becoming a single entity. But becoming a single entity ain't no picnic, right?
Indeed.
So let's just talk about, what some of the major components are that you need to wrestle with when you find out. You wake up one morning, you picture wake up, they probably know, but the VP or COO or VP of operations wakes up and finds out they now are in charge of two companies, not one. Let's go.
Okay, well, the first element that comes to mind, I wrote a blog a few weeks back for Network Studies, right? And that
very
blog,
popular blog.
I do believe it had good stats. Yeah, but if you haven't, you should go click on it.
Click.
Regardless. And
wait, what did they say? Like, comment, follow.
Subscribe, I think, is the...
Okay, subscribe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But in that, it spoke about, what are some of the triggers for doing a network study? Of course, there's growth and getting into a new region. And then one of the others, primary ones, which I've been dealing with, is mergers and acquisitions.
Help us first define what is a network study. I know everybody or lots of people know what it is, but let's just put that on the table.
Yeah.
We do have, just to remind you, an enormous audience of technology people, CIOs and others, and they may not know as casually as you the term network study. So tell me what that is.
Because when I'm talking about network, I'm not talking about
an IT network. No,
very much
you're
not
talking
that.
about.
I'm talking about the building network or the distribution point network, fulfillment point network. It doesn't have to be your own buildings. It could be somebody else's.
Yes.
But ultimately, the network study helps you decide where these buildings should be, who they should distribute to, how they should operate, how big they should be. And it sets the foundation for the network.
Right.
And so when we end up in M&A world, sometimes it can be, a very small acquisition, no problem. I'm actually going to just eat a single or a couple of sites into my larger network. And other times you've ended up with two significant networks that then have to figure out how they go together. And so there's one kind of famous acquisition that happened in 2018 with large beverage company. And until last year, when I was chatting with those folks, it's still fairly two independent networks because of the challenges that happen about physically, what do they want to do? How do they want to integrate two businesses together? So that's the first thing when we're talking about making two businesses or two operations into one. You have physical assets that you have to decide, what do I combine? You also have elements such as you own certain buildings, you're going to lease certain buildings with termination dates to them. And so figuring out how all of those merge into one is highly complex, and oftentimes there's not one answer, right? There's a whole proliferation of different approaches that folks can do.
You just said a whole bunch of things there that are interesting, okay?
At least.
Yes. So let's start with this. We're gonna talk about Company A, Company B. Mm-hmm. They merged to become the AB company. Very exciting, right? The stock market loves it, or whoever. And Company A has 6 warehouses across the entire geography of the United States. Company B may or may not have a national network. Maybe they're strong in one region or in a couple of regions. So the first thing you say is, let's just put them all together. First hurdle, as you just said, not so easy, not so fast. What if they're all leased buildings? So now I have a whole, I think in my example, we've come to 10 facilities that are all under lease. And the leases expire in different times, right? One could be just signed last year and you have 9 more years on the lease, and one could be only coming up in 2 years. And so the first complication we have to think about in terms of the speed with which you can start getting efficiency is, well, the leases either allow it or don't, right? Mm-hmm. Then
or lease or 3PL contract.
Lease, 3PL contract. And even if you say, to your point, you said you may own the buildings. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes it's a mix of the two, right? Because one company B had one certain philosophy towards assets, and the company A had a very different philosophy towards assets. But just because you own the building doesn't mean you can get rid of it that easily. It could be in a bad market, it could be in a bad condition, it could have no value, or it may, back to something, pull you towards a solution that leverages the owned building. The other thing I think is interesting about what you're saying is geography matters. Mm-hmm. So obviously the hot spots will be where geographies overlap between the networks. And it could be sometimes the default is if Company A is the big cheese and Company B is the little cheese, but the little cheese may have more strategically valuable locations in the network. But that could be annoying because a site that we say this is the perfect location, but actually the expansion ability of that site is very limited and we can't make use of it, right? So, and that's kind of all the things you wrap into when you're thinking about there's not really one perfect solution. Right. There's a reality that you accept, mm-hmm. and you're making best with the reality you've got. And so you cannot evolve into a perfect situation overnight, right?
Definitely not.
Right.
Do you want to move to the next chunk?
I mean, I could go on if you want to, but if you, let's talk. No, we have to be careful. This goes by so quickly, and it's better to touch all the big points, and then we can go back.
Okay, because there's one other chunk we can get. Okay, let's
move to the next one. No, throw it out. What is the other chunk?
Well, the next one I was going to talk about was the operations within this building. So we talked about the buildings.
Thank you. Actually, I do
want the equipment, right, and how those buildings have been set up. Like, I mean, the merger, the acquisition could happen between. There's typically going to be some level of cohesion between the two, but one could be a highly D2C, one could be more of a B2B business.
I think that's a really important point.
Yes.
It sounds obvious, and just so everyone, it's clear in everyone's mind, if I am 70% wholesale
Mm-hmm.
and I just bought a company that is 70% retail, meaning they own their own stores, right? And I want those stores.
Yep.
Just for example. But so it's not even as stark a contrast as B2C and B2B.
Yeah.
It's like I'm do almost all my volumes wholesale. I rarely break a pallet, just to be ridiculous.
Yep.
I rarely break a pallet in my warehouse. And then the retailer, company B, is like, well, we've never shipped a full pallet out in our entire lives. The two operations are so fundamentally different that the merger of the two is not obvious. In fact, it's probably the case picking person who would have a better time adopting, absorbing the pallet
Yeah, because
guys
they have a
than
more
vice versa,
sophisticated-
because it would be a little
Right.
bit more, the change management would be
Right.
much lower than if you had a large pallet in, pallet out operation suddenly doing case picking.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, it's actually kind of funny when we have quite a number of 3PL clients, and you know, there has been over, at least certainly over my 25 years of work, a definite shift of clients wanting case or less than case picking in a 3PL environment. And the 3PL guys are always the same. They're like, oh, it's so expensive. It's so labor intensive. It's like, yeah, but that's
That's why
that's
they're
what it
giving
is.
to you.
What are you complaining about? Just
Yeah.
set up a good pricing table and get the job done.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right. So that I'm glad you brought that point
Okay.
up.
Well, then I guess the next one, I would take it to the kind of application park digital
Okay.
side of the conversation about software portfolios. So very oftentimes you've got companies that are coming together, they're operating different ERPs and a whole slew of different operations software.
Right.
And again, it's often not an overnight switch. You're bringing these together and you're having to make a decision of one, do we put on the same platform? We'll talk, I think, about data in a little bit, but one, do we put on the same platform? Is it one of the platforms we already have? And then beyond that, they're going to have to go through that transition, which is going to take oftentimes a fairly large lift.
Yeah, I think it sounds to the layperson, it may seem obvious that you would want company A and company B to operate on the same technology platform, and but that is not an obvious thing. I think best practice or long term, yes, we do. We would want the entire company to be on a single platform. But let's imagine there are all sorts of ways that's complicated. This could be, well, first, essentially, if I chose, let's pretend company A, company B is smaller, is what we're doing in our little fantasy example. So company A is doing the acquisition, says, well, you're going to migrate to our platform. Now, imagine if company A's platform is a little bit archaic, a little bit old, that's terrifying, right? So then it's going to trigger, well, is that the right decision, or should we both be migrating? I'm either doing a massive re-implementation of the system, of company B's system, or I'm going to look at it and go, well, actually, no, I'm going to do a massive re-implementation of company B's system because the technology is more modern and has longer legs, let's say. Or you're replacing it in both entirely with a whole new system. That is not an easy thing, right? It almost makes the buildings problem look simple.
Yeah, I would have to
You
agree.
know?
Yeah.
And so okay. And then sometimes, very often we've seen companies actually not rush.
Well, and I think that's kind of part of it as well, that there's some software that, you kind of want to get your financials together. You kind of want to set that foundation early on. And then there's other solutions like warehouse management systems, picking on that. If you have independent sites and the WMS is communicating with the ERP anyways, and there's not too much communication between the sites, then the decision can often be, you know what, let's put that to the side for now. We will operate on multiple warehouse management systems for the foreseeable. The same could be said for the TMS, the YMS, whatever other acronyms you want to throw in there, but the ones that are more specific to singular sites as opposed to the entity as a whole.
100%. And this is back to the point you made about the operations and how you could easily see the two companies having very different operations. So just like they would have different material handling systems, different operating procedures, they would have different potential WMSs. They could have, you think about it, you could have the same WMS. They could both be running, just to be so neutral about it, they could be both running Manhattan's WMS, but very, very different versions.
Yeah.
And to a point where it's not like if you're running Manhattan in the cloud and you're running Manhattan on premise, this is not a light choice to make between the two, and leaving them, alone may be the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, that's
at least in the short term.
Well, and a hugely good point. Just because it has the same brand name on it does not mean that it's the same one at all.
Right. Just because it's the same brand doesn't mean it's the same system at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, is that enough?
I would move
on.
Flow. Yeah.
All right. Next.
Well, the piece that ties into everything software is everyone's favorite thing, which is data.
Yeah.
And we've just spoken about how you can end up finding yourselves with some things that are merged in terms of your software, some things that are not merged. And a large part of the repercussions of that is going to be the quality of the data and your ability to combine that data in order to gather your insights, make your decisions.
Right.
And that can be sometimes easy, sometimes hard.
Right. So even if the system stays separate, right? Even if you'd kept everything separate, everything is separate, but at the highest level of the organization, there needs to be unified data. And that means at minimum the data warehouse and then all the processing and reporting that comes out of the data warehouse needs to have data that is coherent between the two acquired or merged entities.
Right.
And you just got to think about vendors, customers, bill of materials, item master data. Is there anything I'm forgetting?
Probably a whole
Probably a
slew
million
of them.
things.
Yeah.
That all need to be harmonized
Right.
in order for us to truly understand the business.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and to understand the business, and there's something to be said about you could understand the business in a you could go the hard route and have a very heavy external reporting. You tie it all together. So it's one about understanding the business, but it's another about making your lives a little bit easier as well, right? Are you going to set this up such that there is a referenceable data source that is kind of applicable to both of them, or are you going to potentially kick the can on doing that and just create an offshoot headache for a lot of folk and potentially discontinuities between
so to me, the key thing for a lot of people to understand is on paper, in an Excel spreadsheet now, the benefits of an acquisition or a merger can look enormous. But the reality is you've got to have a patient composure, because it's a long horizon before the benefits get reaped.
Yeah, and an understanding as well that, you said it at the start of the podcast, when there's a whole lot of hard work that happens, right, to get to the deal. And oh my God, there's going to be a whole lot of work after that. It's not
years.
It's not
right. It's a marathon. It's a multi-year effort to actually make whatever the investment bankers told you, to make that actually come to fruition. You're in for a long haul. And talking about hauls, Jennifer Hall is one of the best in the business to help make you happy.
Oh, there you go.
The pun came up, so I had to use it.
Thank you. I appreciate the plug.
Have a great weekend.
Oh, can I say one thing though, about our two become one?
Yeah.
So my first ever concert, can you guess what it was?
To what? Concert?
To become one.
I don't know.
S Club 7.
Sorry?
S Club 7.
I don't know anything about what you just said.
That's heartbreaking. All right. Well, with that.
I'm an old man. I mean, if
Okay.
you'd made a reference to like Duran Duran, I could relate. I could say, oh, I
sorry.
remember that.
Mhm.
How is that? Who's that person I really like? Oh. Well, see,
All right. Well, then let's.
have a great weekend.
Yeah. Have a great weekend.